I have a hypothetical rhetorical koan to ask and for you to contemplate for a moment. Where do problems exist? Where do problems exist? A slightly different way of saying it is where is the root of a problem? Where is the root of a problem? Our typical analytical mind and way of thinking is not used to the mode of consciousness called contemplation or self-inquiry. So the answer to these koans, where do problems exist? Where is the root of a problem? Is more like a realization or an aha moment. Not an answer in the way that we typically look for an answer to a question. The koan itself, where do problems exist? Where is the root of a problem? Contains the answer in the form of a realization, an insight, an aha moment. also our typical way of relating with so-called problems. Or you could even insert neurotic suffering in the place of the word problems. Where does neurotic suffering exist? Where is the root of neurotic suffering? Our typical way of relating with problems or neurotic suffering is to take for granted that they exist in the first place. And assume, one, that they have to, that that's just a part of life. And two, that they exist and that the root is out there somewhere. But consider, to whatever degree you are currently quarantined or living in a different routine than normal, possibly at least one or two so-called sources of problems or neurotic suffering have been removed from your day-to-day. Some others may have emerged with your new routine, but let's look for a moment at one or two that are not there right now. Whether it's work, your boss, traffic, a certain person that you don't typically like to interact with, but have to usually. It's easy when that person, event, situation, or scenario is being reflected back in a tangible, physical way, right there in front of you, so to speak, to misplace the root or the source of the problem over there. But when that person, event, situation, scenario is physically, tangibly removed, don't you still sometimes find yourself ruminating over it, worrying about it, manipulating thoughts to feel better in regard to that person, situation, event, scenario, planning ahead for next time you come in contact with them, creating problems about something or someone that's not even really there. Can you at least do a little thought experiment right now to imagine you have conjured up a problem in your mind about something or someone that's not physically there, and ask yourself the koan, where does the problem exist? Where is the root of this suffering? Over there or over here? That's easy enough to see that it's over here. But say the person walks into the room. The event or situation suddenly plays out physically in front of you. Using that tool or muscle of contemplation, inquiry, that slows down the typical way of thinking and reacting without taking anything for granted or assuming anything. This person walks in, this situation plays out. Now ask, where is the root? Where is the source of this problem? Where, be very honest, see it clearly. Where does the problem exist? Over there or over here? Last week, I laid out a map or a scheme of layers of the mind field, or layers of descending projection. There was pure, impersonal, spontaneous, effortless perception and awareness that projects part of itself down onto a layer of the mind screen and becomes an I, or I am. And then this layer of I, or I am, projects part of itself down onto a quote-unquote lower layer of the mind screen and becomes I am this, I am that, I am me, I am a person. And then we said any unresolved conflict, trauma, drama, wounding, emotions, suffering, problems, gets projected yet again onto one more layer of the mind screen in the form of others, in the form of how you as that person sees or experiences the world. And you will always see it or experience it through the lens of whatever unresolved stuff you have buried, to whatever degree of conscious awareness of it, on the layer of the person. And if you're not careful, you will place undue blame for your fear, for your anxiety, for your insecurity, for your anger, for your untrust, onto an other person, onto an outside world. But the practice of contemplation, the practice of self-inquiry, is to question everything. To not let anything go without examination. To not take anything for granted. So at this point, you have to ask yourself, and at many other points along the way, in regards to deeply and preciously held beliefs, is it true? This belief that I have about this problem over there. And of course, the stakes are being raised for us right now in the collective Because the easy assumption is there's a big bad wolf called the coronavirus causing problems in our world, causing problems in my life, causing me to be afraid. You have to look closely, clearly, honestly, and ask, but where is the root of that problem? Is it true that a problem exists outside of me? The good news, when you return the source, the root to the proper place, is not to punish yourself, but it's because now you can work with it. Now you're in control. The control that you thought you lost by being tossed around by these external problems was an illusion to begin with. Usually, just by asking these kind of contemplative questions and having an answer revealed to you in truth is enough to shift the suffering itself. And often you don't have to do anything else. But sometimes it requires a little bit of practice, a little bit of retraining, a little bit of tilling the soil that's otherwise hard and packed down with a lot of assumptions, to really get it. You have to really desire to get it. You have to really desire to not suffer as your sole motivation for this kind of inquiry. The next koan to ask, that always gets overlooked and never asked, once you see where the root of problems is what is a problem? What is it? If I gave you a blank piece of paper, something to draw with, could you draw a picture of a problem? What is a problem? From conditioning and improper training, we think we know what a problem is. Isn't it obvious? But upon further investigation, really ask yourself this right now. What is a problem? Does it even exist ontologically? A problem itself is an idea that gets conveniently but inappropriately attached to something or someone on that last layer of the screen, as though they're doing it and as though the problem is actually real. A problem is an idea that only appears on this personal layer of the screen. From the pure I am place, are there any problems? From the pure transpersonal or impersonal, pure awareness, pure perception place, there are no problems. We're even seeing on the last layer of the screen where others are perceived. There are no problems there either. They're just images. They're just people. They're just events. They're just situations. The problem is an idea, an interpretation that's rooted in place, tied down, embedded by the ego on this personal layer of the screen to keep you locked in to that very small, limited, perpetual suffering identity. But when you look deeply, do problems even exist? So it's kind of 3 layers of inquiry or koan that we're doing right now to tease apart the assumptions. Where do problems exist? What is a problem in the first place? And then, do problems even exist? I want to remind you, before we open it up for question, conversation, sharing, of another profound truth, probably the most profound truth and realization that I want you to get at some point. But at least let this truth soak in to your pores, not filtered through the analytical thinking mind, but receive it directly. You are alone. Override conditioning about what that means. Override the ego's interpretation of alone as meaning separate or isolated, and see the truth. That's all you have to do, is see the truth. That I am the only one aware of anything. I am alone. I have always been alone. There is no other awareness besides mine. There is no other awareness outside of mine. This may hit you in a flash, or for those of you new, it may require a little more exploration in context of the rest of my work, the rest of what I teach, to see the profundity of that. Everything that has ever appeared on your screen of consciousness, every problem, every suffering, every other person, every event, situation, every anxiety, every worry, every fear, every conflict, even every happiness, every joy, every peace, every love, has happened only to you and is at its essence an idea. That doesn't make it not real, just makes it not what you thought it was. And you are ultimately and intimately safe as the only awareness aware of anything. Nothing can harm you there. If you are alone, if you are all that is, what happens to your problems? What happens to all of your manipulations? What happens to all of your fears? What happens to all of your needs? Displaced, misplaced onto others. You are already, always perfectly complete and whole as the one alone awareness. And maybe these times of quarantine, if you can override boredom, override restlessness, override fear, there is an important, necessary, brilliant, profound discovery awaiting of this very thing. You have never truly been with anybody else. You have always only been with yourself and with reflections and projections of yourself. You are doing all of this. And at the same time, you're doing none of it. And in the potential monotony or condensed routine that your days have become during this time, you can use the tool of contemplation rather than being restless, afraid, or bored, to really look into the truth of things, look into the heart of life, look into the essence of your own being, and see that everything that flashes onto the screen of consciousness eventually flashes away, and you are still left here alone. A person comes, a person goes. An event comes, an event goes. A problem comes, a problem goes. Suffering comes, suffering goes. What is left? Who is left? Nobody but you. Nobody but you.